The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Ocarina of Time. By Ganondorf 8. June 11, 2015. Bonus Chapter 4, Legend of the Creators. I decided to take a 3-hour nap, given how reading Ganondorf's chapter in the Hyrule Historia really tuckered me out, and also because my brain needed to rest. Now I'm ready to carry on by reading the final chapter, which appeals to me, and it involves those who originally created both the Triforce and Hyrule using powers far beyond anything mortal minds can comprehend. At first, I was worried there would be no information about the great goddesses, given how they are omnipotent beings who exist on a much higher plane than we do, yet the book surprised me by revealing an entire chapter dedicated to them. When I was in this video game world, I remember Twilight, who portrayed Princess Zelda, told the story of the great goddesses, so I suspect what she said will be repeated here. Yet there will be more information given how she only knew a small portion based on what was passed down by her ancestors. The first thing I need to do is familiarize myself with them, otherwise this will just be confusing. The great goddesses are 3 divine beings, who were worshipped by the various tribes of Hyrule until all but the Hylians eventually started worshipping their own gods, and they created the world in question alongside the relic, which I'd say has caused more harm than good given how certain people desire its power for their own selfish needs. No one knows where they originate from, as that's beyond anyone's way of thinking, and what they look like remains unknown apart from one individual who encountered them, and I have a feeling I know who it is. Some have argued that the great goddesses were in fact male, but they were discredited for the vast majority of people associate them as female. The first is their leader, although whether or not they had a hierarchy isn't known, but she is Din, the goddess of power, and the one whose essence was claimed by Ganondorf, which caused certain events to unfold. It sounds like I'm blaming her for what transpired across all 3 timelines. Yet I know she isn't to blame, because the evil king was tempted at a young age to seek the Triforce, and also because he was the reincarnation of a demon who sought the Triforce as well with his demonic horde. The next is Nehru, the goddess of wisdom, and Princess Zelda associates with her the most given how much wisdom she possesses for someone so young. This wisdom has been passed down from generation to generation because the original woman named Zelda decreed it long ago. Finally, the last is Faroe, the goddess of courage, who has been depicted as the youngest, and is the one who had a strong connection with me, given that I was the chosen one who claimed her power, even though I felt that was a mistake. No one knows why they created the world which would eventually become Hyrule, but because of their status as goddesses, who would have stopped them otherwise? This chapter begins when Din, Nehru, and Faroe descended down upon an empty void where nothing existed, but they were about to change all of this because they had an urge to create something. Apparently, the first bit of dialogue that is spoken between the 3 sisters is what Twilight mentioned to me when I first started my journey, so this is stuff I already know about, but it wouldn't hurt to get reacquainted just in case I've forgotten. No one is sure if the great goddesses were related, yet the book says that they are, so I'll go with this given that it is official. If I recall correctly, that visual aid Twilight showed me when I first met her at Hyrule Castle, the princesses of Equestria portray the great goddesses minus Twilight herself, as she was Zelda. It makes sense that Princess Celestia is Din given her leadership role, Princess Luna is Nehru given her vast knowledge, and Princess Cadance is Faroe given her youthfulness and eager spirit.
"We have arrived here, my sisters," said Princess Celestia. "I can understand why you would want to do this, Din, but would it be a wise decision for us to make? What if the world we create does not follow the path that we had intended for it? What if it becomes corrupted? We could be making a mistake if we were to go ahead with this," said Princess Luna. As always, your words of wisdom speak truly, Nehru. I believe that we can create an ideal world where the creatures will be able to coexist with one another. We have seen the creation of other such worlds at the hands of our fellow gods and goddesses, yet they chose to guide their creations rather than allow them to figure things out on their own. My vision of a world would be one where we three would not interfere unless it was absolutely necessary, and that the creatures would thrive on their own. If it were to be corrupted, then there would be those who would strive to destroy the corruption, thus returning it back to the peaceful ways of before,"
said Princess Celestia.
"If such corruption were to happen, then such a world should be destroyed before it spirals out of control,"
said Princess Luna. Even from reading this dialogue, which I remember from before, the three goddesses were already set in their ways that made them easy enough to recognize. Din was eager to create a new world because she had a desire to see lesser beings evolve, and perhaps achieve greatness, yet Nehru was cautious as creating something meant watching over it vigorously. If the denizens of this creation became unruly, or viewed themselves as being superior to their creators, it would be a crime against the goddesses where the punishment was instant obliteration. Farore on the other hand chose to remain neutral on the subject given how her sisters often had arguments like this, yet she would eventually say her thoughts on the subject at hand.
To do such a thing as that, Nehru, would mean resorting to actions that would label us as murderers in the eyes of our fellow gods and goddess,
said Princess Celestia.
Then that makes you naive, yet you always were like that, which makes me glad that you are my sister Din. The creatures that shall inhabit this world must strive on their own to become more than what we envision them to be, and if they can achieve this, there is no telling what they will be able to accomplish. Of course, we must also take into account of the demons that exist below the heavens in the underworld, sister, for they will no doubt try to sabotage our work when we have finished. Their leader is one who does not pose an immediate threat, but that could change in the future if it were to gain power,"
said Princess Luna.
"What do you suggest?"
asked Princess Celestia.
"A means with which our world can protect itself,"
replied Princess Luna. Even before the world came to be, the goddesses were aware of Demise, who existed deep underground, and that he could be attracted to their creation. Creating the Triforce, which I assume was their protective measure, would be a mistake given how Ganondorf's original incarnation came to the surface because he wanted the Triforce for himself. He probably would have ignored their creation altogether had there been nothing which could have tempted him.
"That would require much force in order to make it possible, Nehru, and that would involve us having to give up a small portion of our power to keep the demons of the underworld from doing as they please,"
said Princess Cadence.
"A sacrifice of that nature sounds within reason, does it not, Farore?"
asked Princess Luna.
"Perhaps, but we must be careful when we create this means, my sister, for if the demons do not claim it and corrupt this world, then the creatures we create will succumb to the temptation of wanting to possess our power. We have seen from our fellow gods and goddesses that the creatures they created were frail things that were easy enough to sway under evil influence despite the original good intentions that they were created to have,"
replied Princess Cadence. Despite being the youngest of the three goddesses, Farore certainly knew what she was talking about, as though she were somehow seeing into the future where Ganondorf acquired their gift to their creation. Once people get that first taste of power, they simply want more because it becomes an obsession which can't be quenched until they are full. All it takes is one dose to corrupt even the strongest will you can imagine, and it turns into a twisted form of itself.
Both you and Nehru have provided grand insight to this matter, and it is something that shall be taken into consideration. Once we are finished creating this new world, we shall create the means with which this world shall protect itself from the demons. If the creatures become tempted to wield such a power, then we shall have a measure in place ready to act upon our command, and carried out by our will,"
said Princess Celestia.
"So which of us will contribute what?"
asked Princess Luna.
"I have been thinking about that for some time now, and I shall create the land given how I represent power. You can introduce law into this world, Nero, given your vast wisdom exceeds that of myself and Faro Ray, and creating those who are to follow such laws is your task, my youngest sister,"
replied Princess Celestia.
"For some reason, I find this most unfair,"
moaned Princess Luna.
"Because my contribution appears to be the biggest?"
asked Princess Celestia.
"That is the reason, but you will have to use much power compared to myself and Faro Ray. So, I see it as a fair trade in that sense, but I hope the creatures will worship all of us equally,"
replied Princess Luna. Even though they were deities, they acted like they were humans given how they argued over differences, but it also meant humans had the strongest connection to them. Din would then use her flaming arms that brimmed with power to begin building their ideal world, and within mere moments, which probably felt like eons to everyone else, she created the Red Earth. She didn't use much in the way of strength, but then she wasn't trying to be fancy with her work. Nero then poured all of her wisdom onto what Din had made, and this resulted in the creation of law, which made her feel proud of her accomplishment. She chose not to make it overly complicated, as she knew that the incoming creatures would lack the intellect she and her sisters possessed given their status as deities. Faro Ray used her gentle soul to create creatures who were to follow Neru's laws, yet while I thought they would appear as tiny beings given they would start as babies, she instead created them as adult-sized, for her intention involved having them make their way on their own, and eventually reproduce later.
"There. We have finished our work,"
said Princess Celestia.
"It hardly took any time to complete, but so far things look promising. The creatures will begin to multiply within their concept of years, and will follow your laws, Nero, yet I cannot help but think they may go beyond my own limitations,"
said Princess Cadence.
"So you have similar grievances?"
asked Princess Luna.
"It is impossible to deny this as being a possibility, for these creatures have been given the potential to grow over time. Even though we are in agreement over leaving behind something that can serve as a form of guidance, it would be unwise of us to leave it unprotected because they could abuse its power. They may desire to be just like us, which would be disastrous,"
replied Princess Cadence.
"Yes, we must have someone handle this situation,"
suggested Princess Celestia.
"One of us would suffice,"
suggested Princess Cadence.
"If we were to interfere in the affairs of this world, Faro Ray, we would do more harm than good given our immense powers. No, we will need another goddess who can protect what we shall leave behind for the denizens of this world. I know just the individual who can perform this task, for she has proven herself worthy, and does not possess the sympathy that holds us back,"
said Princess Celestia.
"That is a good idea,"
said Princess Luna.
"I am glad you think so,"
said Princess Celestia.
"There is another issue which must be addressed,
Princess Luna."
"And what would that be?"
asked Princess Celestia.
"Even though much of our vast power was used to create this new world, I could sense that the excess power spread out across the fabric of existence, and has created worlds similar, but different to the one which we have made. I bring this up because we may need to become involved with these places as well should creatures begin thriving there,"
replied Princess Luna. Alternate worlds. Now this was something which required a closer inspection, so I read another side note that explained it. These alternate worlds were created as a result of leftover divine energy that the great goddesses took no notice of, so while such places have some things in common with Hyrule, they are different worlds that don't necessarily resonate with the goddesses. While no one knows how gaps between these worlds came into existence, it says here such gateways only appear to a chosen few. Maybe it's to prevent such a power from being misused?
Our concern is with our own creation,
said Princess Celestia.
I had a feeling you were going to say that, Din, but we should have some kind of presence even if it is minor at best. These other worlds were formed with our power, and ignoring them would be betraying our oaths as goddesses,
said Princess Luna.
I never could say no to you, Nehru, when you make such logical reasoning, but how do you propose we deal with these places which now thrive in the fabric of existence?
Asked Princess Celestia.
Perhaps divine beings can be assigned to watch over these worlds, and ensure that they are guided down the correct path. It will not be by our hands that will shape what is to happen, but rather the hands of the creatures who will appear shall determine their fate, and maybe gods and goddesses similar to us will appear to handle things. All we can do is begin the process by having those who represent us watch over them until things are in place,
replied Princess Luna.
Then that is what we shall do,
announced Princess Celestia. The side note ends right there, and says that I need to look up places called Termina, Holodrum, Labrina, and even an alternate version of Hyrule where armies fight one another for supremacy in order to learn more about these alternate worlds. I'm not about to do anything like that, as that would mean even more reading, and I'd rather just finish off this chapter, and give this book back to Rainbow Dash.
I am inclined to agree, so let us proceed with leaving behind that which shall serve as a symbol,
suggested Princess Cadence. The three great goddesses were satisfied with their work, and returned to the heavens where they would implement their plan of having another goddess watch over things. At the point where they departed, 3 golden triangles appeared where each one contained the essence of their power. These triangles became known as the Triforce, and when used together, a person's most fondest wish would become true, and that does explain why it needed to be protected at all costs. Word of this artifact's power became known to the early civilizations, which prompted many of them to seek out the power for their own selfish desires. This is exactly what the great goddesses feared even before performing their task of creating their ideal world, but rather than destroy everything and starting again, they chose to rely on the efforts of another who had long since earned their trust. They approached this goddess roughly several days after the world had begun, where Din began explaining what was needed.
If we 3 were to watch over our creation, the chances of us choosing to destroy it become increasingly high. I know it sounds as though we are neglecting our duties given how this world was created by us, but we believe this is the best course of action. That is why we have come to you, Hylia, for among the other gods and goddesses here in paradise, you are the only one who holds the strongest trust within our eyes,
said Princess Celestia. Hylia? That sounds like quite a coincidental name given how one of the tribes refer to themselves as Hylians, but I wonder if there is an image of what this goddess looks like. She probably isn't as majestic given how she is merely a goddess without a fancy title like the golden goddesses have. Yes, the book also refers to Din, Nehru, and Farore as both golden and old. It didn't take long to find an image of Hylia, and I was shocked at how she had a striking resemblance to Princess Luna even though I've only ever seen her image in books. That's when I remembered Twilight mentioning in one of our first letters I sent back and forth. She said long ago, Princess Luna was banished to the moon for 1,000 years, and transformed into a nightmare steed. Nightmare Moon. I read some of her legends when I studied back in Equestria, but I never would have guessed she was portraying the goddess Hylia in this chapter. I guess good and evil with regards to Equestria have no meaning in Hyrule, but I'll picture Nightmare Moon as the majestic Hylia instead of her true self.
To have your trust, Din, is most honorable,
said Nightmare Moon.
This world my sisters and I have created is not but a fledgling, which means they have tremendous amounts of potential to become something grand, but we are aware of the growing temptation that has resulted when we left behind the Triforce,
said Princess Celestia.
While I will not question your reason for giving them an artifact that contains the essence of each of you, I must admit that the urge to abuse such a gift is very strong. They are simple beings that are drawn to power, which is not surprising considering our fellow gods and goddesses desire similar needs, yet if they use your gift incorrectly, it would destroy them before they have a chance to blossom. I can see why you have come to me for help, Din, given how I am considered one of the most peaceful deities around,
said Nightmare Moon.
Unlike the three of us Hylia, you are more reserved when it comes to passing judgment,
said Princess Celestia.
You can achieve a similar state of being, you know,
suggested Nightmare Moon.
We great goddesses have grown distant over the eons, and for that I will admit that we acted hastily when it came to the creation of this new world. We were so enthralled with the prospect of seeing this world change and grow, yet we were ignorant about any potential problems that could arise. We view ourselves as being above such petty actions as watching over our creation, for these creatures are beneath our contempt, but we are not blind to the notion of asking one of our own to do that which we cannot,
said Princess Celestia. I'm actually surprised that Din would even say something like this, but then it isn't unheard of that gods and goddesses view such matters as beneath their notice. What's also surprising is how the Hyrule Historia assumes this is what was discussed between them, given they were on a plane that exists beyond our means.
What would you have me do?
asked Nightmare Moon.
The Triforce has need of a guardian to protect it from those who would try to abuse its power. Our new creation may have only been in existence for a mere twinkling of time compared to roughly several days for them, but already the beings Faroe created, who were to follow Nehru's laws as she dictated, have learned of the gift we have left behind. They are young fledgling creatures, yet their curiosity will lead them down a dark path which is sure to bring about destruction,
replied Princess Celestia.
And I am to be this guardian?
asked Nightmare Moon.
There is no one else who can perform such a task of great importance,
replied Princess Celestia.
What guarantees do I have?
asked Nightmare Moon.
I am not following,
replied Princess Celestia.
Protecting such an important artifact is something I will do, Din, but my concern is that I will end up being nothing more than a servant to you. While my status as a goddess is not the same as what you and your sisters possess, there are certain rights which I am entitled to, and refusing to compensate would mean me not agreeing to this idea, even though your trust in me is strong. If I am to guard this relic for you, then I must do so of my own volition, which means you, Nehru, and Faroe cannot interfere in my decisions, no matter how trivial some may be. I already have some ideas on making sure the Triforce remains safe from those who desire to abuse its power, but these will be enforced without my having to gain your approval,
said Nightmare Moon.
Such a guarantee we accept,
said Princess Celestia.
Then I shall proceed to travel down to this world, and protect the Triforce,
said Nightmare Moon. The goddess Hylia was said to be very approachable for a goddess of her nature, given how she would appear before the citizens of what became known as the Surface, and informed them that she had been chosen by the creators to protect them. For some time, peace would reign across this world as Hylia served as their guardian, but eventually she had need of someone who would become her chosen hero, destined to fight against dark forces who had existed since the beginning when the great goddesses first created their world. The book mentions next to nothing about this warrior, for his identity is shrouded in mystery, but it is said that he acted as a predecessor to the first individual known as Link. While I would read more about Din, Nehru, and Faroe, it seems the next part of this chapter focuses squarely on Hylia herself, which makes little sense given how she wasn't a golden goddess like they were, but the Hyrule Historia insists on having her included given what she ends up contributing, and she is acting in their stead as per their request. Things would remain peaceful until one day when an incident occurred which would test Hylia as the goddess chosen to protect the surface, and it says that this is where the original incarnation of Ganondorf comes into the legend. To think that in the previous chapter, I ended up learning what his final fate was, and now I get to experience what caused him to reach the point where he was destroyed. A large crack suddenly formed, and a terrifying dark power seeped forth from it, which is exactly what the great goddesses feared as they were aware of the existence of demise. This demon has existed since before time began, and paid no attention to what was happening in the heavens, but when he sensed a great power brimming forth from the surface, he desired to have it for his very own. Anyone who stood in his path were nothing more than victims being led to a slaughter, and while Hylia was confident that she could handle this crisis, the great goddesses didn't have the same enthusiasm.
"The demon has made his presence known,"
said Princess Cadance.
"We knew he would attack this world of ours once he caught wind of the artifact we left behind, so now we are paying the consequences for our actions. Din, we never should have created this world, for if we had not, then Demise would not be attacking with his demonic horde, and the natural order would have remained unaltered as it has been since the beginning of existence. Before things get out of control, we must destroy our work along with Demise and his horde. We can then remake the world in a better image than before without such problems persisting,"
suggested Princess Luna.
"I find it hard to believe that you who wields the most wisdom among us would condone such a thing as destruction, Nehru, but then we have agreed to the compensation of Hylia where none of us must interfere. She will be able to handle the situation, and we must believe that she will succeed in driving back Demise and his dark children. Besides, we all wanted to contribute to this creation of ours, so there is no need to deny its right to exist,"
said Princess Cadance.
"From the beginning, Faroe, I was skeptical because I feared incurring the wrath of the demon,"
said Princess Luna.
"As you have mentioned before,"
said Princess Cadance,
"should Hylia have need of our assistance, then we shall go down to the surface without question,"
said Princess Luna.
"She knows that doing so would make her be seen in the eyes of the people as a weak goddess who was forced to call others to help deal with something she is capable of figuring out on her own. No, we must not get involved, Nehru, despite the desire. Deep down, you know this is true, so we shall merely watch the proceedings from here. I have the utmost faith that those I created to uphold your laws shall overcome the demonic horde,"
said Princess Cadance.
"You may want to look down at the surface,"
suggested Princess Luna. Faroe was confused at what Nehru meant, so she decided to take a look at what was going on, and she was shocked to see the people were being slaughtered at the hands of the demonic horde. Their numbers continued to multiply because of the crack in the ground, and were showing no signs of stopping anytime soon, and the goddess began weeping over how many lives were being lost. The humans and other tribes were strong when it came to dealing with their own kind, who became obsessed with wanting the Triforce, but they were completely in over their heads when it came to facing demons. Demise himself was causing the most damage by slaughtering everything that got in his path, and Nehru offered simply to her sister,
"We must go down there now, and deal with the situation before it reaches a critical juncture. My heart weeps for those who have been killed in all of this senseless violence, but we cannot interfere, otherwise we shall break the agreement we made with Hylia. Besides, I know things are not all that bad as there is someone down there who has been defeating the demonic horde,"
said Princess Cadance. Nehru then looked down at the surface, and saw a man dressed in green attacking various monsters where he was felling them one by one without any effort. It seems not all hope was lost, considering a single human was fighting back against the demonic horde using nothing but his sword and skills, which made Nehru very impressed.
"I guess my words blinded me,"
said Princess Luna.
"Most of the humans have been slaughtered as they were created without any special characteristics compared to our other creations, so the demons have been killing them because they offer little in the way of resistance,"
said Princess Cadance.
"Yet this one human is fighting incredible odds, and prevailing without difficulty,"
said Princess Luna.
"Could he be the champion?"
began Princess Cadance.
"The what?"
asked Princess Luna. "I'm not surprised that Hylia's chosen champion is featured here, given how he was destined to protect both her and the world from any evil that would plague it, but I wish this book would have provided more of an explanation into who he is. That's because this is the last time he gets referenced, as all it says here is he simply vanished into history upon the conclusion of this battle against evil." Well, in any case, the champion has been doing pretty well for a human, but the others of his kind were being killed no matter where they were, as Demise and his horde refused to end their slaughter until Hylia gives him what he wants.
"He has proven to be most brave,"
replied Princess Cadance.
"While this one is cut from a much different cloth, the rest of his kind are being killed, and their homes have been destroyed along with much of the land. We knew Demise to be a monster, yet we did not expect such anarchy as this. Well, Faroure, since you insist that the three of us do not interfere, here is hoping Hylia has an idea to bring this nightmare to an end before it gets even worse,"
said Princess Luna.
"We must have faith in her,"
said Princess Cadance. "It says the humans couldn't survive against Demise and his horde, but Hylia did have a plan which she would execute in order to do two things. First, she needed to protect the surviving humans who managed to survive the onslaught, and second, she had to hide the Triforce, given this is what Demise wanted, which is the reason behind his invasion." Knowing that time was against her as Demise's horde were progressing at a ridiculous pace, she acted quickly by commanding them to travel to her temple, which was where the humans along with the other ancient tribes worshipped her, and that she would perform a miracle in the aims of preventing any further bloodshed against them. Once they had reached her temple, Hylia used her power to first remove it from the ground along with the immediate area before launching up into the sky in the hopes of keeping them safe. I wonder why she rescued the humans, and left everyone else behind to face the demons who continued to wreak havoc? This confused me at first, as I thought she had compassion with those who choose to worship her, but when I continued to read on, my answer quickly came. Among the tribes that existed back then, Hylia connected with the humans more often as she viewed them as being just like her, even though she was a goddess. The slab of rock which was sent to the sky would one day become known as Skyloft, where the descendants of the humans lived for many generations, and without any knowledge of where they came from other than a few ancient documents that state life once existed below the clouds. Demise still remained with his demonic horde on the surface, but with the humans now out of danger, Hylia could concentrate on dealing with the problem at hand, and she was assisted by the other tribes who had no choice but to remain. This resulted in a war between light and dark lasting many years, and while much of what happened isn't mentioned in this book, it does reveal an important encounter between Hylia and Demise.
"You have proven to be a most persistent irritation, Hylia, but know that you cannot continue going,"
said Demise.
"What makes you believe that I shall fall?"
asked Nightmare Moon.
While those pathetic humans have somehow disappeared, which I suspect your immediate involvement, goddess, you and these other useless creatures have merely been delaying the inevitable by fighting back. Your numbers have been reduced to such an insignificant amount that fighting them holds no reward for my loyal followers, for they hunger for the flesh on their bones. If you tell me what I want to know, I may spare your subjects, although I cannot guarantee it,"
replied Demise.
"You have become blind by your own ambition, but then this is not surprising to me. Wretched demon, you have caused pain and suffering for far too long, so now the time is nigh to finally bring an end to these hostilities,"
said Nightmare Moon.
"Then these people shall know that their goddess allowed them to die. A shame really, as they do look as though they had great potential, but this will never come to pass because my horde will feast on the banquet before them. My followers may be simplistic in their nature given how most are mindless monsters who wish to consume what they kill, yet they obey my will without question. Now, I shall ask you one last time, and should you refuse, then this land shall run red with blood, and you'll be racked with intense guilt over it as you could have saved their meaningless existence,"
said Demise. While it sounds like he was making nothing but threats in order to get what he wanted, this demon was serious about what he said he'd do, as he had tremendous power which makes him feared among mortals, and a concern among gods and goddesses alike. The only thing he desired was the Triforce, because it would enable him to rule the world unopposed. Just like Ganondorf aspired to, which explains why the latter is a reincarnation of the former. Hylia was certain he had no idea where the humans had been sent, so she felt relieved knowing they were safe from his horde, yet she decided to make it so that her temple could never gain access to the surface again by creating a barrier.
"I know what you shall ask of me,"
began Nightmare Moon.
"Then answer my demand,"
shouted Demise.
"No, I will not speak,"
said Nightmare Moon.
"Don't think you can fight against me, Hylia, for you no longer have your sword which you used to cut down my forces,"
said Demise.
"My blade is not needed,"
said Nightmare Moon.
"Ha! Such bravado coming from you is sheer amusement, but it's most unbecoming for someone so graceful. Your sword is all that kept you from being torn to shreds by my horde, but this makes killing you pointless, as I was hoping to have had a grand battle which would run red with the blood of your precious people,"
said Demise. What he didn't know was Hylia has sent both her sword and harp to the land in the sky because she believed the next chosen one would have better need of them, but perhaps she had been hesitant. According to this small side note here, her sword was originally called the Goddess Sword, but in time, through a number of unusual circumstances, it became the legendary Master Sword. Wait, what? The Master Sword? Hylia's sword is the very one I used on my journey after being sealed away for so long? I would learn more about it, but I really want to finish this chapter, and hand the book back to Rainbow Dash, as I've had enough to last me a lifetime. As for this harp, while I'm pretty good with a guitar, I know next to nothing about harps, so I'll just ignore that because the side note concludes by saying I should look up the chapter referring to Skyward Sword.
"Why do you bring such torment to this world?"
asked Nightmare Moon.
"Because I am here for the Triforce,"
replied Demise.
"So you seek to claim it?"
asked Nightmare Moon.
"Don't act so ignorant, goddess, for you knew that's the reason I came to the surface. With the Triforce in my hands, I shall conquer this world, and make it a place where my demonic horde shall run amok. If you had told me what I wanted to know sooner, there could have been few lives sacrificed in the name of keeping such knowledge safe, but then it wouldn't have made much of a difference anyway. Those humans were such delicious morsels for my horde that they desired to keep on going until there were none left to consume, Yet now that you've taken them away, these lesser beings will have to do,
replied Demise.
The Triforce will never be yours,
said Nightmare Moon.
Once you're mere inches away from death, you'll be telling me everything,
said Demise. What he didn't know was that the Triforce was no longer on the surface as Hylia sent it into the sky along with the land which housed the surviving humans, and because there was a barrier in place which now prevents him and his forces from getting up there, he had no chance of acquiring it. All the Hyrule Historia says about what became of the Triforce, apart from being given a redirection to the Skyward Sword chapter, is that the goddess made sure the humans now living above the clouds wouldn't be tempted, for if they did then her efforts would have been for naught. She used a rather complicated system to ensure no one other than her chosen champion finds the Triforce whenever the need arises, and some secrets were said to have been passed down to mystical beings who acted as her vassals. This is where both sides would fight each other in a final conflict where casualties mounted at a ridiculous pace, but somehow Hylia was able to prevail even though many who fought beside her lost their lives. Again, the chapter that focuses on this Skyward Sword goes into all of the significant detail, so all I get out of this is enough to know what became of Demise.
You have been bested, demon,
said Nightmare Moon.
How is this possible? I am vastly superior to you, and yet I have been defeated?
Asked Demise.
Darkness can never overcome light,
replied Nightmare Moon.
Then do what you must against me, because you are the victor here, goddess, but know that my followers shall seek their revenge against the people of this world. My death shall merely be the beginning of an even greater conflict where countless lives will be lost. There isn't much you can do, for those wounds you sustained by my blade are fatal, and I know your people cannot survive without you here to guide them. In your efforts to defeat me, they shall pay the price in the end,
said Demise.
No, there is a much different fate you shall face,
said Nightmare Moon.
And this would be better than killing me?
I'm not surprised by this, goddess, for you lack the instinct to kill, unlike those creatures who fawn over you. They can kill whenever they want because they have the urge to spill blood no matter whose it is. Even their own allies' blood gives them a surge of violent tendencies. It won't be long before your faithful followers turn against one another, and because of your weakened state, they will turn on you to gain the power that you possess.
Such a cycle is one that all beings experience as they cannot deny their deepest desires,
said Demise. It was at this point where Hylia had heard enough from him, and proceeded not to end his existence, but rather trap him so that he could never return. She sealed him below where her temple used to be, and used a powerful binding spell which would last for thousands of years. Demise was said to have been stripped of his physical form, and became nothing more than an incarnation of hatred whose only senses involved the consumption of the light which had sealed him away long ago. Without their leader around, the demonic horde lost all direction, and were easily defeated by those who followed Hylia, where upon their victory they would begin settling down and creating civilizations. Yet she felt as though Demise made a valid point about her followers one day becoming consumed with darkness. Hylia's life force was weakening because of the injuries she had sustained, and even though Demise had been sealed away, she knew that the binding spell wouldn't last forever, and that one day he would return to wreak havoc upon the world once more. You know, this sounds a lot like what the sages did to Ganondorf when he was defeated in the future by sealing him away with a seal that would eventually break, so history repeats itself quite often in Hyrule. Before deciding on a course of action, Hylia needed to consult with the great goddesses because they needed to be aware that she was on the verge of death, but only one listened to her, and it was the one historians say was someone they never expected.
Where are your sisters?
Asked Hylia.
Din and Nehru are not here, Hylia, for they decided to engage in another activity,"
replied Princess Cadence.
"I need to tell them as well as you that demise has been sealed away below the surface where my temple once stood, and the war against his demonic horde has been won, but I have sustained these terrible wounds during my conflict with him. My life force is slowly draining away, which means I do not have much time left,"
said Nightmare Moon.
"Where is the Triforce?"
asked Princess Cadence.
"It is now hidden away in the piece of land which I sent to the sky that also houses the surviving humans along with my temple, and a powerful barrier exists that prevents the dark forces from reaching them. For now, they remain safe along with the golden power, yet it will not be lost forever as there will be a time when a new chosen hero is needed. Everything has been put into place to ensure my chosen one shall fulfill their destiny, so there is no need to be concerned,"
replied Nightmare Moon.
"Can you keep going?"
asked Princess Cadence.
"These wounds are far too severe for me to make a full recovery, so no, I will not be able to continue my anointed task of guarding the world of your creation,"
replied Nightmare Moon.
"Then you would like for my sisters and I to take over for you? I am sorry, Hylia, but we agreed to not interfere in the affairs of our world, and we intend on sticking with this vow,"
said Princess Cadence.
"Demise will not remain trapped forever, Far-Ray, for one day in the future he shall break free of the seal which keeps him imprisoned, and I fear the world you created will not survive his wrath,"
said Nightmare Moon.
"Should we decide to do this, Hylia, then our ways will only serve to bring about destruction, for we great goddesses lack the compassion that you possess. That is the reason why another goddess was needed, for we do not understand the hearts of those who live in this world, and for that we would simply cast them into an eternal abyss were we to intervene. I am certain you can find a means of preparing for the eventual return of demise. I know you will come up with an appropriate strategy which will protect the people of the future. If your life were to come to an end, I pray that our creation does not reach a point where it will require us to resolve a solution,"
said Princess Cadence.
"I understand what must be done now, and know that everything will be taken care of,"
said Hylia.
"Again, I wish that we could do more for you, but that would be perhaps the greatest disaster of all, and one that goes beyond even the mindset of a demonic monster like Demise,"
said Princess Cadence. While it sounded like they didn't want to interfere in the affairs of their world for selfish reasons, it's because they couldn't due to their power being far too great, and most likely causing complete destruction rather than trying to save it. Knowing this dark truth, Hylia set a plan into motion to prepare for Demise's return, for no one could stop him unless they had the necessary tools. Knowing her death was imminent, she gave up what was left of her godly form, so that one day she would be reborn as an ordinary human and assist the chosen hero who would take up arms against the dark forces. The golden power was one that couldn't be used by the goddesses, for it was created to be that way, so only humans and others like them were allowed to utilize its power. She also created a spirit which was sealed into her sword, whose purpose was to guide her champion on his destined path. There was a few other things Hylia did before passing away, but it says here that I would need to look up Skyward Sword to learn the rest, and also learn what lead up to the defeat of Demise, which I read about in the previous chapter. Without a goddess watching over the world, the darkness that exists in people's hearts continued to grow stronger, and this was even after Demise was destroyed, so something needed to be done to prevent the Triforce from being misused, given how it was now unprotected from the desires of people. The ancient sages would one day construct a temple where one would need special keys to open the way to the sacred realm. Hey. So this is what leads into the events that I witnessed when Ganondorf brought me into his world. Speaking of events, there is only one more section of this chapter. After Demise was destroyed and sealed into the Master Sword, the world wasn't watched over by the eyes of the great goddesses, and this continued on even when Hyrule became a kingdom. Many safety measures had been created to ensure the world would remain safe from the darkness which may appear, yet sometimes even the most precise of preparations can backfire simply due to an exception. Ganondorf would be the exception because he achieved the one thing Demise couldn't, and that was claiming the Triforce for his very own, which was through manipulation. According to the Hyrule Historia, the goddesses didn't interfere with the past and downfall timelines because the kingdom didn't reach a point where they were needed, but the future timeline had an event which got them involved. Never had they gotten involved because of their power being too much, yet Ganondorf's actions prompted them to respond in a manner no one was preparing for. After being imprisoned for centuries inside of the sacred realm, he eventually managed to escape because the sage's seal had grown weaker over time, and upon returning to Hyrule for the first time in a long while, the evil king began to slaughter people out of revenge for being banished. His rampage knew no bounds given all attempts to stop him failed because he possessed the Triforce of power. It is said the people had a small sliver of hope in the form of the Hero of Time as they believed he would return and save them from Ganondorf's wrath. The hero didn't appear, which makes sense because of a few factors. The first was that he had been returned to his childhood, meaning he no longer exists in the future, and he also closed the pathway that exists between time for good. Second, he could only travel 7 years between time periods, so there was no chances of him being able to travel several centuries to aid those who needed him. Third would be by the time Ganondorf returned, centuries had passed, meaning the hero had long since passed away, and his descendants probably had no idea what they could have done. And finally, it is said that he was separated from the elements which made him a hero. The people realized their pleas did nothing, so they pleaded to the great goddesses for help. While Din, Nehru, and Faroure have kept their distance when it came to getting involved, the pleas soon had them thinking.
"Can you hear them?"
asked Princess Luna.
"Their screams for help have been non-stop for these past moons,"
replied Princess Celestia.
"The one who possesses your essence, Din, has been murdering countless lives in the name of revenge, and shows no signs of slowing down at all. He truly is the reincarnation of Demise, as we originally suspected when he first laid his hands on the Triforce centuries ago. If he continues in this manner, then the people of our world will all perish, and he will usher in an age of darkness, the likes of which have never been seen before,"
said Princess Luna.
"I am aware of his actions, Nehru, but we cannot get involved in what becomes of Hyrule,"
said Princess Celestia.
"Is it because our power would destroy them before he does?"
asked Princess Luna.
"Even now, you know me very well, my sister, and yes, I fear that our involvement will make things worse. When this Ganondorf first acquired the golden power we left behind, we did not take much notice of it because he was a mere mortal who had no idea what he was getting into by trying to use a power beyond his comprehension, but it seems our judgment of him was wrong,"
replied Princess Celestia. So the great goddesses knew of Ganondorf and what he was doing back when he first claimed the Triforce of power, yet they chose to do nothing because of their stance regarding not getting involved. Things could have been different had they stepped in, even if it meant risky Hyrule's existence. By choosing not to do something about him, they essentially allowed him to reach his current level of power, and now they have regret.
"Perhaps we should have never left behind the artifact, for it has caused many to become tempted by greed." "It is because the humans and the other creatures were flawed,"
said Princess Luna.
"But I do not blame you, Faroure, for none of us knew this would happen, but I suppose lesser beings do not grasp such notions. We cannot blame Hylia for this either, given how this is happening eons after her unfortunate passing,"
said Princess Celestia.
Hylia knew what she was doing when she invoked her plan to prepare a chosen one to protect the people from demise, and that turned out to be a success until this man was born into the world below. Without the threat of the demon horde, the people of Hyrule lived a peaceful existence until Ganondorf appeared, and we goddesses became complacent as we were not needed, but now things have gotten out of control, and they seek our help to resolve this situation. I know we agreed not to interfere when Hylia was tasked with serving as the goddess of this world, yet now we have no choice but to go down there,
said Princess Luna.
Can we though?
Asked Princess Celestia. Given how the Hylians and the other tribes have been worshipping Hylia for generations while merely acknowledging the golden goddesses, Din was right to be cautious about getting involved, as there was telling what kind of reaction they would get. The people most likely believe that Hylia is still watching over them, or she has chosen a successor to carry out that task, so seeing the creators could be either a blessing or a curse.
We must, otherwise we will have failed them,
replied Princess Luna.
Those words rings out the biggest truth that we have experienced,
said Princess Celestia. This revelation from Nehru was enough to finally convince Din that they had to go down to the surface in order to deal with what was happening, and when they arrived mere moments later, they were shocked at what they discovered. Corpses were strewn about, and destruction was rampant everywhere, which showed Ganondorf was ruthless in his bid for getting revenge. While the great goddesses knew demise to have been a horrific embodiment of darkness, the king of evil proved to be even worse given what they were witnessing with their own eyes. The sight was enough for Faroe to start crying, because the people meant a great deal to her even though they don't necessarily worship her, and Din could merely lower her head down in shame over this horror.
I cannot believe a mere mortal has committed such a horrific act as this. This man is no longer mortal, sister,
said Princess Luna.
Yes, you are right, Nehru. He has become a demon, which makes him an even greater threat,
said Princess Celestia.
Faroe, what are you doing?
Asked Princess Luna.
I can hear the screams of those who have lost their lives in this senseless carnage, and they curse us goddesses for not helping them much sooner. They also speak of a hero who can travel through time that was supposed to come to their aid by defeating this man, but never appeared for reasons they do not understand. If only we had listened to you, Nehru, about getting involved sooner, or perhaps destroying this world and recreating it anew, then this atrocity would not be happening,
replied Princess Cadance. It says here Din and Faroe didn't approve of the idea of restarting everything from the beginning, yet Nehru always believed it a viable option in case something like this happened which was beyond their means to fix. Now, it's not known if this is how they truly felt. As a side note, here says this is what historians believed Nehru desired in case their creation proved unworthy, and the same is true about the feelings of the other great goddesses, so it's a matter of how one chooses to perceive it.
Restarting things would be a terrible thing,
said Princess Luna.
What made you change your mind?
Asked Princess Cadance.
After seeing this destruction, destroying this world and starting it again would yield no positive results. The problems that affect this world would simply repeat themselves anew, and thus the cycle will never come to an end. I guess it took this experience to make me realize that such an idea was foolish, and for that I must apologize for ever considering it an option,
replied Princess Luna.
And both Din and I apologize for not acting sooner,
said Princess Cadance. This is true, for they did have the power to stop Ganondorf just like that. Even though he possessed the essence of Din, his power paled in comparison to theirs, but their promise to Hylia combined with their own fear of getting involved allowed this to reach such a critical juncture. Faroe then heard additional voices begging for a miracle to occur, and that they didn't care what was to happen so long as something was decided.
We must bring an end to this before any more lives can be lost. I do have a suggestion,
began Princess Celestia.
That tone in your voice fills me with dread,
said Princess Cadance.
This land has suffered far too much to allow it to exist as it is, so our only option is to start again, but not in the manner that Nehru originally believed. This world shall continue because I believe it still has great potential, yet we must cover up this blight and give the people a chance to begin life anew. This may sound cruel, but we must bury what remains of this land under a torrent of water from the heavens, so that the people do not have to remember this travesty,"
said Princess Celestia.
"Do you understand what this means?"
asked Princess Cadance.
"Yes, which is why it is with a heavy heart that this must be done,"
replied Princess Celestia. Din's plan was known as the Great Flood, which just so happens to be included in this book, so this next part is something historians agree actually happened because it would change everything in this timeline. The plan involved causing a great downpour from the heavens to wash down onto the kingdom, and eventually bury it under the ocean forever. Hyrule as it currently stood couldn't be salvaged, for Ganondorf's rampage made sure of this, so the goddesses believed that the people deserved a chance to start all over again rather than simply destroy everything, and recreating a new world, as all that would do is deny what was really happening. However, there was something which held them back from acting.
"We cannot flood this world,"
began Princess Cadance.
"Why not?"
asked Princess Celestia.
"To do so would mean not only sealing this world below the surface of the water forever, but the remaining people as well, who are innocent in all of this. If we choose to destroy them in this fashion, we would be playing into the hands of Ganondorf, who desires their destruction. We cannot give in to his malicious ways, which is why I suggest choosing a small group of people who shall live on, and build themselves a new world that exists on top of the impending ocean. While countless lives will be sacrificed because not everyone can be spared, we can still save a select number, thus robbing Ganondorf of his revenge,"
replied Princess Cadance.
"You are correct, Faroe. To kill them all would make us just like him,"
said Princess Celestia.
"Since we shall be flooding the land and burying it underwater forever, we should have the people that will live on make their way to the highest mountaintops, and wait for the downpour which is to come,"
said Princess Cadance.
"And Ganondorf?"
asked Princess Luna.
"He shall be dealt with once we have finished this task,"
replied Princess Celestia.
"How do you propose we inform those who are to be saved?"
asked Princess Cadance.
"We cannot reveal our true forms to the people, for we are beyond their understanding, but perhaps using a mental image that explains what they must do will suffice instead? We must use the Triforce as a symbol, otherwise they may believe themselves to be possessed, which is a typical response for such beings,"
replied Princess Luna. Having come up with a solution, even though it would be seen as tragic, the great goddesses began informing people they had chosen to be spared through visions commanding them to take refuge on the highest peaks, and not to question their wishes. While it did cause some slight confusion because of not being allowed to ask what was happening, the people made their way to Death Mountain among other high mountains, and waited for something to happen. Once the chosen ones were safe at the top of the high points, Din, Nehru, and Faroe began concentrating their power together to bring down the torrential rains from above that started to flood Hyrule in an instant. Such a process didn't take very long, and soon there was nothing left other than a large assortment of islands, which were the mountain peaks protruding from above the water. It says here many people were claimed by fate while others were claimed by destiny, yet the majority perished when the water came down from the heavens, and those who had been spared wondered why they were allowed to life. To further ensure that the old kingdom never return, because of what Ganondorf had done, the great goddesses froze it beneath the waves while also dulling out its colors so that it would be forgotten over time. Yet another side note says eventually people started spelunking in an effort to uncover any treasures washed away by the downpour, because such items were worth a fortune because of being artifacts from an ancient era. Now that Hyrule had been buried underwater, the people who survived now had to begin their lives anew on the ocean, and eventually the memories of the old world will be forgotten over the next several generations. Yet there was one factor which the goddesses assumed had been buried with the kingdom. Somehow, Ganondorf managed to survive their watery grave, although it didn't take long for them to find him, because his power made it easy to locate him. Once they found and confronted the evil king, the goddesses showed a side of them which had never existed before, yet he was ready to face whatever they had in mind.
So in the end, you decided to wash away everything rather than simply destroy it?
Asked Tyrek.
How has such information become known to you?
Asked Princess Luna.
I've spent many centuries locked away inside of the sacred realm where you originally left the Triforce, and during that time I gained much knowledge, which includes knowing some of your more secretive desires. I knew you wouldn't destroy everything, as such a notion would have done nothing. All it would do is relay the problems from the old world into the new one, thus beginning anew. I'm not surprised you lacked the guts to perform a genocide, yet I'll admit that I wasn't expecting you to kill countless lives just to bury Hyrule underwater,
replied Tyrek.
It was because of your actions that we had to do this, said Princess Luna. Really? Or maybe deep down you desired their destruction because of how corrupted they became from the very beginning. You may think that you ended their pitiful lives because of wanting them to no longer be tormented by me, but in truth you wanted them to suffer simply because they strayed away from your intentions. Those who ended up surviving do so because you wish for them to have a second chance, yet they will disappoint you again and again. Such is the frailty of descendants spawned from your original creations,
said Tyrek. While his words were harsh in nature, Ganondorf was essentially telling the truth, as the goddesses did harbor some issues back when they originally created their world. They felt that the first civilizations would bring about their own destruction, as they weren't ready to handle such mystical power in the form of the Triforce, and their suspicions were correct, which prompted them to ask Hylia to serve as the guardian. After her passing, the world remained capable of sustaining itself for a time, yet numerous disturbances did keep the idea of restarting fresh in their minds, and Ganondorf merely laughed at it.
You dare laugh at us, mortal? While you may possess Din's essence, you are still beneath our contempt,
said Princess Luna.
Mortal? In case it wasn't obvious, goddess, I have lived for centuries, far beyond my life expectancy among others, so calling me mortal holds no weight. The Triforce of power has extended my life, and has become a part of me, given how my already immense power has reached levels not previously known until after I claimed it. I know you plan on trying to take such power away, but know that you chose me to acquire this piece for a reason. If I wasn't worthy, then I would have passed on from this world centuries ago, and I would have died as a minor presence if nothing more,
said Tyrek.
Granting such power to you was perhaps one of our gravest miscalculations, but we can easily rectify this within an instant. While you may be beyond the limitations as we dictated upon the mortals of our creation, the power you possess right now does not come close to what we great goddesses are capable of. We should have killed you when you first appeared, yet our decision to not interfere has come back to haunt us for our inaction,
said Princess Luna. That was when Ganondorf started laughing again, which prompted Nehru to showcase anger which she wasn't known for.
You arrogant insignificant human! Again you laugh at us? Ending your existence shall be the greatest pleasure of all. Perhaps in the next life, you will come to understand what it means to show us respect. You? Kill me? What a weak excuse!
Said Tyrak.
And what makes you say that?
Asked Princess Luna.
If you intend on carrying out such a meaningless threat, you will essentially be just like me, or perhaps even more so, especially when you consider that you killed countless lives in order to save this world from my fury. The great goddesses have become murderers in the same manner which I have been ascertained to, and don't try to deny my words as false because you know what you did when you decided to flood Hyrule.
Replied Tyrak. Again, Ganondorf's words were true even though he had a harsh way of saying it, for the goddesses had acted exactly as he would. By killing countless lives, they had committed a genocide despite doing so for a good reason, which was the salvation and future of Hyrule, and the evil king laughed at how they viewed themselves as being above contempt. He wanted revenge against those who banished him centuries ago, and they handed his desire to him on a silver platter, much to his pleasure. When it dawned on them as to the emotional significance behind their actions, Din, Nehru, and Farore concluded that what they had done was beyond foul.
You three have long feared that getting involved would have grave consequences due to your way of thinking, and now your fears have become a dark reality. You will pay for this!
Shouted Princess Luna.
It wasn't by my hand that they all died, but rather your own,
said Tyrak.
He speaks the truth despite his cruel tongue, and yet we had no other choice but to perform this grim task,
said Princess Celestia.
Did you?
Asked Tyrak.
Explain,
replied Princess Celestia.
You could have ignored this world while letting me carry on with my task. Of course, you couldn't stay away as the screams of those who pleaded for help compelled you to come down from your lofty perch. I'm surprised those fools would even ask you three ancient ones for help, given you abandoned them ages ago for reasons which are of no significance,
said Tyrak.
Perhaps we have not been the best protectors, and our action has caused many to lose their lives, but then we would not have done this terrible deed had you not prompted the people to call us, and aid them with a miracle,
said Princess Celestia.
Which is a mask for in truth you committed destruction,
laughed Tyrak. Even though I despise him for what he has done, I do have to agree with Ganondorf. While their effort can be described as noble, they should have tried something else rather than kill countless just to bury the old world under a torrent of water. I'd say the great goddesses acted too fast, and could have come up with a better idea, but this has become part of Hyrulean history in the future timeline. Nothing can reverse what has happened, so everyone involved have to deal with the aftermath even if they don't really want to. While the people may have suffered greatly, Ganondorf was still viewed as a threat because he could easily traverse these new islands, and continue his rampage, yet the goddesses knew that he needed to be put in his place, which didn't involve killing him.
Ending your life would no doubt make us no better than you, but you cannot be allowed to harm those who have been given a second chance. You may possess my essence, but it is a small speck compared to my true power, which is beyond your comprehension. Therefore, we shall seal away your power alongside the ancient kingdom that lies below the water's surface,
said Princess Celestia.
What?
Exclaimed Tyrak.
You have only yourself to blame for returning when you should have passed away centuries ago. The Master Sword, the blade that was originally created by Hylia, will serve as the key which shall keep both your power and the ancient kingdom sealed away until the time comes when a chosen one has need of it again. Furthermore, what little power remains with you will be restricted to this small island which is now your new home. Ganondorf, while we three have caused a terrible tragedy this day, your sins are far worse than anything we could have done,"
said Princess Cadance.
"Such measures mean nothing, for I shall soon regain my full power,"
said Tyrek.
"We are not finished. To make sure that the seal remains in place, certain arrangements will be made which will ensure this new world has protectors who can guide it and the people along to a better tomorrow. While it does not relieve us of our guilt, it shall be our final contribution, for once we have returned to the heavens, never again shall we appear in this world," said Princess Cadance. This turned out to be true, as once they departed after banishing the evil king to the isolated island where he remained for the next several centuries and made their arrangements, the great goddesses never returned because their actions only hurt those they were trying to protect. It says here that 3 gems were created which acted as keys to an even greater secret, and were given to 3 spirits who had been tasked to protect them by the goddesses until the chosen one comes along to claim them. This secret connected to Hyrule, and lay dormant underwater where it would be restored once the hero has proven himself to be exactly that, a hero who has overcome tremendous odds. Ganondorf, however, had anticipated the goddesses punishing him in this fashion, for he knew they would eventually come after him once they had caught wind of what he was doing. When he killed the sages who were praying in their respective temples, the Master Sword did not receive their blessing, and because of this, the divine blade became dull and incapable of striking down evil. Above all else, he still desired the remaining 2 Triforce pieces, for he wanted to bring back Hyrule as this new world was one that he couldn't accept. For Ganondorf, it became a matter of biding his time, and this would be a wait that lasted centuries. While his magic was restricted to the island the goddesses banished him to, he still set up shop as it were by constructing a fortress that in time would become feared by sailors of all kinds who said that those who travel to this place never return, as though darkness itself claims their lives. It became known as the Forsaken Fortress, a haven where hideous creatures lived who served the evil king, and once civilization had been established across the Great Sea, as people started to call it, he would put his plan into motion where he would seek out young girls with pointy ears in the hopes that one of them was a descendant of Princess Zelda, and possessed the Triforce of Wisdom. Once that would become his, only the Triforce of Courage remained, and legends say it was split into 8 pieces and hidden throughout Hyrule, but now exist underwater. No one knows the exact locations of these pieces, but perhaps ancient treasure maps can lead the way. As for the 3 spirits chosen by the great goddesses, they served as guardians of the tribes who worshipped them, and were the only beings left who knew how to speak a now forgotten language. I'd like to read some more, but that is where the chapter in the book comes to an end. But I still can't believe the goddesses would abandon their own world like that just because of one mistake that ended up claiming so many innocent lives while saving fewer. I guess one can never really understand what goes on in the mind of a powerful deity, for that would be pure impossibility. As for the prospect of me reading another chapter, I've had my fill of the Hyrule Historia, so I'll give it back to Rainbow Dash the next time I see her. But a part of me is still curious about other events that occurred through Hyrule's history. No, I want to return it, as I really should focus on what's important rather than a video game series history, and that is still learning about friendship. As I closed the book and placed it down on the nearby table, the Triforce mark began to glow on the back of my hand, where it reminded me of what was to come in the future. Whatever ends up happening, I hope I'll be able to deal with it, otherwise it could mean the end of me. The end? For real this time? Or is it?